Good morning, Spokane First. Hope you guys are doing good. Man, we made it. It's here. Kickoff Sunday, the beginning of a brand new ministry year. And you guys are starting it the right way by being here at the 9 to begin this brand new teaching series, Practicing the Way, a curriculum for Christ likeness. Here's the big idea that you're going to hear all throughout this fall as we walk through this series, that if you want the life of Jesus, you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. That we want to become like Christ, but that means doing what Jesus did. That our lives reflect his life. That there is a cooperation that is necessary with God, with his Spirit, if we want him to transform us from the inside out, to actually become like Jesus. And so what we're going to look at throughout this entire series, this entire session, is the core disciplines of Jesus' life. And then we're going to challenge you, we're going to give you an opportunity to actually practice those in your lives, with your families, at your places of work, at your schools. That if we want the life of Jesus, we have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. And so today really is just introduction, kind of priming the pump, creating the context for what we're going to be doing this next semester. And the big idea for today is this: what is a spiritual discipline and why do they matter? I thought it might be a good idea that if we're going to do a whole teaching series on specific disciplines, the specific disciplines of Jesus, then we might as well have an understanding of what a spiritual discipline is and why spiritual disciplines matter. So today, that's kind of what we're going to be doing. So before we get started, here's what I want you guys to do. At your tables, you're going to have some handouts. Hopefully, they're there on the table. Go ahead and grab one of those. The very top of that page, there's this question: what are your daily habits? And here's what I mean by habit: a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. So I'm not talking about your rhythms, right? I'm not talking about where you go normally. Like, I go to work usually and I put my kids to bed usually. I'm talking about those little habits, those little practices, those little behaviors throughout your day that are regular. And a great way to think about it is that it's hard to give up. That if somebody said to you, hey, stop doing that, or do something different, there would be a part of you that would go, I don't really know if I want to do that. So at the top of your page, you'll see a list of 5. Now, examples of these things might be, I scroll Facebook or social media, and I spend a lot of time during the day, every day, just being on my phone. For some of us, it might be like smoking or vaping. For some of us, it might be, I have a glass of wine before I go to bed at night or before dinner. For others of us, it might be, I watch television or I watch sports or I read the newspaper. Just little things. Like when you think about what is consistent, what little behaviors or habits are consistent throughout your day, that when you think about maybe giving them up, you're like, I don't really know if I want to do that. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to, at your tables, on your own. We don't have to discuss this, because some of these habits might be things that we're like, I don't know if I'm ready to share these things with my table group yet. But you kind of on your own, by yourself, fill out that list of 5. What are your daily habits? Go. Okay, hopefully it wasn't too brutal. Hopefully it wasn't too hard, but it's good to get an idea that before we start talking about the practices of Jesus, we have to have an understanding, an honest assessment of what our current disciplines are. What are the things that we're doing on a daily basis, and recognizing that those things actually do something to us. So, any further, or before we get any further, let's actually define what a discipline is. What is a discipline? Here's a good working definition. A discipline is any activity I can do by direct effort that will eventually enable me to do that which currently I cannot do by direct effort. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say you want to be able to bench press 250 pounds. Now, there might be some of you out in the room that can do that. So just indulge me for a second. But let's just say my guess is that most of us in the church and around our tables can't bench press 250 pounds. So let's just say that you want to become the type of person that can bench press 250 pounds. Now, do you just go to the gym tomorrow and throw 250 pounds on the bar and get underneath it and just rep it out? No, because if you did that, you would maybe not even get the bar off the rack, but let's just say you did, you would crush yourself, probably break your sternum, trying to bench press 250 pounds. So it is not true of most of you that you can bench press 250 pounds. Now, how can that be true of you? How can it become true of you that you can bench press 250 pounds? Through discipline, through going to the gym every day. Maybe it's every night before you go to bed, you do a set of push-ups. Maybe you go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week and you're working out your chest and you're working out your triceps and you're building the muscles through these little disciplines to actually become the type of person that can bench press 250 pounds. That's all a discipline is. It's an activity, it's a behavior, it's something that I can do by direct effort. I can go to the gym 4 times a week. I can work out my chest. I can do push-ups. I can do 10 push-ups now. Maybe I can do 15 push-ups. Maybe I can do 20 push-ups. I can bench press 130 pounds now. So maybe I'm going to do that. So it's these things that I can do by direct effort that will eventually enable me to do that which I cannot currently do by direct effort. So really, it's the same idea when it comes to a spiritual discipline, okay? A spiritual discipline it's similar but different. It's different in that not only are we exercising our own capacity, but we're actually opening ourselves up to the power of God, opening ourselves up to His Spirit to work in us and through us. Okay, so if that's what a discipline is, a spiritual discipline is simply this. It is how we open our minds and bodies to a power far beyond our own to affect and change. So, let me give you another example. Let's say you want to be a generous person. Let's say you want to be a joyful person. Let's say you want to be a peaceful person. Let's say there's some type of besetting sin that exists in your life. Maybe you're greedy. Maybe you struggle with porn. Maybe you have an anger problem. let's just say there's something about you that you wish wasn't there, or there's something that you see in the life of Jesus that you wish was there. Okay? So, how do we become those types of people? How do we overcome our sin? How does it become true of us that we're joyful, that we're peaceful, that we're honest, that we're generous through spiritual disciplines? Because here's what we do. We open ourselves up through all these different types of practices, and we're going to focus on 3 of them over this next semester. We're going to focus on prayer, we're going to focus on Sabbath, and we're going to focus on fasting. It's by doing disciplines like this that we create space. So just like in doing exercises at the gym can increase muscle and change our actual physical body, if we do these disciplines like prayer and fasting and silence and solitude and Bible reading and all these other things, right? We actually open our lives up for God through His Spirit to transform our hearts so that we become joyful, so that we become generous, so that we start to overcome our sin, so that we start to deal with some of the issues in our lives that we want to overcome, right? How often have you sat down with somebody, or maybe you yourself, right? You're just feeling, oh man, I just can't seem to overcome this, or oh man, I just can't seem to make this true of me. Man, I hear about the joy that followers of Jesus has, or that Jesus says to us in Scripture that we're supposed to possess, but man, I just don't have it. And a lot of times we try to manufacture those things, force those things, make those things true of us, rather than just adopting a lifestyle of discipline, of spiritual discipline, rooting ourselves in healthy rhythms, orbiting our lives around Christ through discipline, creating ample space for God to transform us from the inside out. I love what Dallas Willard says about spiritual disciplines. He says this: the disciplines are activities of mind and body purposefully undertaken to bring our personality and total being into effective cooperation with the divine order, to become like Christ. They enable us more and more to live in a power that is, strictly speaking, beyond us, deriving from the spiritual realm itself. A great example is this last summer. We walked through the book of Philippians and we talked about living a joyful life. And at no point was the instruction from Paul just like, hey, be joyful. Be joyful. Come on, just be joyful. No. There were all of these little disciplines that Paul, through his book, points us to. Because he knows that if we make space in our lives for God to work through His Spirit, then we will become joyful. Because joy, much like all of the things that we see in the life of Jesus, is beyond our own ability to possess. We can maybe manufacture it for a second, right? I can just get this windfall of cash and just be super happy and at peace and be like, oh man, this is great. But eventually, I will experience anxiety, stress. I'll be overwhelmed. I'll lose that joy. And the joy that Jesus brings, right? The peace that Jesus brings, the hope that Jesus brings through His Spirit is, you can't take it away. The world cannot rob it from us. And that's the kind of stuff that we want to be true of us. And a major vehicle to become that type of person, those types of people, is through spiritual disciplines, okay? It is to possess that which is available to us in the life and power of Christ through His Spirit, and it is also to overcome and deal with the things that we feel like are robbing us from the goodness of God. This is why Jesus talked so much about being a doer of the word, not just a hearer of the word. Because there is a level of transformation that takes place when we take in the instruction of Scripture and accept the invitation of Jesus. But there is a greater degree of transformation that takes place when we can actually put it into practice, to actually do what he says. That the disciplines are like scaffolding. They're like a trellis, right? Think of scaffolding built around a building, right? That's all we can do. The disciplines are scaffolding. God is the one that goes in and does the work. It's a trellis placed next to a vine, right? That all you can do is build the trellis, set the trellis next to the vine, and the vine is going to do the rest of the work. It's the same type of idea in our own spiritual lives. We can do the disciplines, become a doer of the word, and then create space for God to actually bring the transformation within us. Here's what Jesus says in the book of Luke, chapter 6. And all of this should be on your guys' handout. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? Now, interesting that Jesus is like, why in the world do you call me Lord? Because if I was Lord, if I was the ruler of your life, then you would actually do what I said to do. But a lot of you are just listening, and you're not actually doing anything. It's a challenging statement. You know, how do we know if Jesus actually is the Lord? How do you know if someone's in charge of you? Because you do what they say, right? How do we know we've surrendered our lives to the rule and reign of Christ? Is in our obedience. It's in doing what he says to do. He continues, everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it because it had been well built. Jesus is giving you a picture of the kingdom life. He's like, hey, this is the type of life that you possess when you actually do what I say to do. That this is who God, through his Spirit, will transform us into. Somebody who is resolute, sure, unshakable when life gets hard. Don't you want that? Don't you want that to be true of you? That's what we're all after. We hate how we feel when life is hard. We hate how stressed out we get. I know I do. I want to be the type of person that when life gets hard, my strength, my assuredness, my confidence is actually exposed. That my foundations are proven to be sure. He continues, but the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. You want to know how you can separate hearers of the word and doers of the word? Watch what happens when life gets hard. Watch how they respond when life gets hard. Because I've seen people who practice the way of Jesus, who have a healthy rhythm of spiritual disciplines, daily rhythms in their lives. I've watched them go through hard times, and it is amazing to see how strong they are. And I have seen the opposite. Luke 8:21, this is Jesus again, but he answered them, my mother and my brothers are those who hear the word of God and do it. Those who are in on this good life. Those who have accepted the invitation and are living the life of heaven within the Trinity. those are the ones that they don't just hear the word, they actually practice it. James 1, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, freedom, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed. Makarios, the good life, the life of the gods, the life of those in the age to come, the life of the ultra rich. That is what that blessed idea carries with it, right? Liberty, freedom, right? The idea, and this is so backwards, right? That freedom, a life of freedom, actually comes from a life of submission and surrender, denying yourselves, because at the root of every discipline, there is an element of denial. Because at some point, we're going to have to do things that we don't want to do. Like we're going to have to, and we're going to have to say no to things that we do want to do. Right? But within that denial, that yielding ourselves to the rule and reign of Christ, that is where we actually find freedom. John 13:17, maybe the most important verse. This is like sums it up perfectly. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. If you know these things, you have a knowledge of the way of Jesus. The blessing comes when you do them. The good life, Makarios, there's that word again. It is the good life that comes to those who do them. So here's a great quote that honestly spoke to me. This was years ago, but it's a great picture. It's by Augustine. He says this: without God, we cannot. Without us, God will not. And I think it really sums up this whole idea of spiritual discipline, because it is us cooperating with God. Because here's kind of our tendency sometimes, is that we hear the good news of Jesus, right? We're like, oh yes, God became man, lived a sinless life, died on the cross, rose 3 days later, but he did it all for us. He did it all so that we could be saved. He did it all so that we could get back to Eden. He did it all so that we could get back to God, right? So that we could find our way back to God and actually once again have access to the good life, which is only possible in his presence, right? With God. So we hear the gospel, and we also, there's an element to that where we're like, oh man, it's not just that we get heaven, but we also get out of an eternity that is separated from God. We also get out of an eternity that is spent away from who we were created to be, where we were created to be, a life of just agony and torment, right? We get out of that, but then we also get heaven, and we're like, yes, we say yes to Jesus. I want that. Yes, I will accept the salvation, this gift that God has given me through the person of Jesus Christ. And then we get all the good stuff, right? Through his Spirit immediately, man, we're made new, we're made righteous, we have authority, all of these blessings, right, that come with salvation. And so, like, man, we're excited enough to maybe change our schedules a little bit and show up on Sundays. I don't know, for some, many it's just like, hey, once a month kind of thing. But that's kind of where it stops. There is a public life that are disciplines, that those are good, but there is no private life of discipline. And the invitation of Jesus is that, hey, there is a cooperation that is necessary if we want to experience transformation. There is a cooperation that is necessary from you, and it is in the form of spiritual disciplines. And that's what Augustine is saying. Without God, we cannot. We cannot be joyful. We cannot become generous people. We cannot become peaceful people. We cannot overcome so much of the sin that robs us from the good that God has for us, right? That we cannot do that on our own. It's impossible. But without us, God will not. He doesn't just give it to us. He doesn't just pour it into us. He doesn't just make it so. There is a truth, right? And already but not yet. That yes, where it counts in the eyes of God, these things are true of us. But all of this other that we want, the life of Jesus, God won't just give it to us without our cooperation to his design and his desire, okay? So that is what a spiritual discipline is. Before we get into the next part, a couple questions I want you guys to talk about at your table. Take about 10 minutes and do this. Question number 1, are you the kind of person who avoids discipline or becomes imprisoned by discipline? Right? There is a rigidity that can kind of come through discipline, but then there's also a laziness. Which one are you? Question 2, as you reflect on your spiritual life, where do you see yourself avoiding discipline or being imprisoned by it? Looking at your life with Jesus, what are the areas that you see yourself, oh man, you're putting it off. You're avoiding it. You're kind of blocking it out. You're like, I don't want to think about that right now. Maybe there's this holy hound, right? This spirit nagging when it comes to a certain area or a certain discipline. So pause the video, take about 5 to 10 minutes and answer those 2 questions. All right, so hopefully that led to some great discussion. But before we go any further, I just want to issue a word of warning here. Especially when we talk about disciplines, there is a temptation for the discipline themselves to become the end, not the means. That we will define our righteousness. We will know if we are good or bad, whether or not we are practicing the disciplines or not. That we assign value to our ability to practice the disciplines, right? The disciplines can never be an end of themselves. They are only ever a means. That so often, especially in the church world, we hear a challenge to practice the way of Jesus, right? To do certain things, whether that be study the Bible, or pray more, or fast, or tithe, or give offerings. We have all of these disciplines that are given to us. And we do them. Like we're faithful in doing them. And then we start to think to ourselves, man, like I'm kind of top 1% in this whole Christian thing here. I'm figuring this thing out. I might be a big deal. And that attitude, that is legalism. We can never think that the disciplines are an end to themselves. They are just a means. They are that which we do to create space for God to make us righteous and good and joyful and peaceful, right? We cannot allow them to be an end of themselves. All they are. Here's the end. Here's the motive. Here is the bottom line motivation of spiritual disciplines. The end is life to the full with Jesus. life to the full with Jesus. That is why we practice the way of Jesus. That is why we do these disciplines. To be with Jesus and to allow His Spirit to transform us from the inside out. If we get that wrong, then stuff starts to go south really quick. Like, this is our primary motivation. This is why we do what we do. When it comes to practicing the way of Jesus, it is life to the full with Jesus. So here's another question. I want you to pause the video and talk about it for about 5 minutes around your table. What is the only pure motive for engaging in the spiritual disciplines? Why do you think motive is important? Why is motive important? Go ahead and talk about that around your tables. Okay, as we're wrapping up our time together, I just kind of want to drive this home just a little bit and kind of help us understand why disciplines matter so much. And I want to take you to a place called Finkenwald. I know that many of you know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was. He was a great man, great theologian, but really, really understood the importance of spiritual disciplines. And there was a school of spiritual formation that Dietrich Bonhoeffer was in charge of. And it produced some of the most incredible men and women of the faith really throughout the world and within human history. I mean, it just was like incredible. But when they first started, some of his peers, some of the people that were a part of what he was doing, kind of heard about how intense Finkenwald was. Like, in how intense this school of formation was, this like seminary of sorts was. And began to challenge Bonhoeffer a little bit and say, hey man, maybe you just back off a little bit. Maybe just, I don't know, not expect so much. Even to the point of visiting Finkenwald and like wanting to really see exactly how intense things were and, you know, hoping to get him to back off just a little bit. So on one of these visits, Bonhoeffer actually takes one of the other individuals on a little bit of a journey. Takes him within eyeshot of a Third Reich camp, a Nazi training camp. Obviously, this is all kind of going on during the war. But this is an excerpt from Charles Marsh's book, Strange Glory, The Life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And if you just indulge me, it's a little bit of a long quote, but I want to read it. When the two rowers reached the shore, again, he's taking him on this journey. Bonhoeffer's taking this friend of his on a journey. Bonhoeffer led Niesel, which is the guy he's with, up to a small hill, to a clearing from which they could see in the distance a vast field and the runways of nearby squadron. German fighter planes were taking off and landing, and soldiers moved hurriedly in purposeful patterns like so many little ants. Bonhoeffer spoke of a new generation of Germans in training whose disciplines were formed for a kingdom of hardness and cruelty. It would be necessary, he explained, to propose a superior discipline if the Nazis were to be defeated. You have to be stronger than these tormentors that you find everywhere today. So in response to this admonishment to back off a little bit, to go easier. Bonhoeffer takes his friend to a camp of the Third Reich, shows him the intensity with which they are training their disciples, their soldiers, and says, if we ever want to be victorious in this world, we have to do more. We have to do better than them. If they let up, I'll let up. And it's the same with the world we live in. That we live in a world that is constantly, every day, every moment of every day, seeking to form us into its own image, seeking to shape us into its own image. And we are constantly opening ourselves up for that type of formation. What we do does something to us. And if we want to counterattack, if we want to counter the deformation that is taking place every single day, for a lot of us, without us even understanding what's going on, we have to be so intentional. Our discipline privately must outdo the influence of the world daily. And it really is it's such a challenge because we're just in this every single day. It's a soup that we swim in. So that's my challenge to you. Hopefully you enjoyed the session. Hopefully you enjoyed this next semester, man. I'm just so excited to jump into these disciplines. And here's my hope. Going into this series, going into this whole session, the one thing that I was so worried about is that no one would actually do the disciplines. That when we talk about fasting, no one's going to fast. That when we talk about Sabbath, no one's going to practice Sabbath. That you're going to gain all of this knowledge, and it's going to be fantastic knowledge on all of these disciplines. You're going to become you're going to have your doctorate in fasting. You're going to have your doctorate in Sabbath. You're going to have your doctorate in prayer. But that you're going to have all of this knowledge, and you're not going to do anything with it. That it's just, and you're going to miss out on so much transformation that God wants to do in you and through you. Because, man, my hope is that when we get to the end of this semester, that as a whole church, from kids all the way to seniors, that as we're working through these disciplines, we're going to start to see some fruit. We're going to start to see growth. We're going to start to see and be able at the end to have, noticeable difference in our personalities. That we're actually stepping closer to the life of Jesus, and it's gonna be noticeable. So church family, please, as we walk through this next session, actually overcome that internal reluctance, overcome that internal restraint, that flesh within you that does not want to do the disciplines of Jesus. Overcome them. Put them into practice, and I promise you, you will experience the life of Jesus. You will step closer to the life that you truly were created to live. All right, church family, we'll see you later.